beans differently than in America. So I don't know if that was why it was so good. So that's the whole supply chain is a big question. All right, welcome. Thank you, Ernest. We've got Chris and we've got Jimmy. We got someone in Quebec, someone in LA. Ernest, I don't know where you are, but welcome. I'm in Rochester, New York, and I've got Josh with me, and Josh is in Chicago.
Yep.
So thank you for joining. I'm hoping that this sort of trial run goes well. This is a new experiment. I'm trying to share some of the research that I've been doing over the past few months. I've got my coffee set up. I've got an iPhone. We're going to sort of switch cameras, and Josh is going to help me manage that and also facilitate questions. Josh, if you could post the Slido link again, if there's any anonymous questions that you want to ask, we've got a Slido link, and I'll pull that up on my screen so that I can see those questions as well. So we're gonna start with that. If you have any questions throughout the thing, you can ask them anonymously. You can ask them with your name. Your name is optional on Slido. So the link in the chat is something that you can use to do that. And actually, why don't we just run through the technology? I don't know how familiar you are with. Let me just take a screenshot and sort of highlight what's sort of important here. Welcome, Alexandre. All right. So I'm going to share a screenshot real quick. Josh, I need to be able to share on my primary screen. All right, so Ernie's here from Colorado Springs. Don't worry about the mic. You can just type in the chat, or you can post a link on our Slido link. If you scroll up in the chat, you should see that. Excellent. Josh, can you give me share
Looks
permission?
like you, yeah, I'm gonna have to make you host again.
Oh, oh, what a mess. Okay, Josh, can you just share? This is now. I'll just talk through it. Don't even worry about it.
Okay.
So I don't know how familiar you are with Zoom, but Zoom is what we're using here. And there's a chat little bubble. If you click that, you should be able to see the chat window. There's a participants window, and I want you to open the participants window. So find the two people, they're sitting next to each other. And if you click that bottom button in Zoom, if you're on Mac and on iPhone, there's a participants thing that you can tap on the bottom. And all I want you to do is give me a thumbs up. Is that enabled?
It's they moved it to a little tab with I think it's just reactions.
Okay, so there's a more tab on the iPhone if you're watching from the iPhone, and then reactions. If you just give me a thumbs up, if you can find that. Excellent. Cool. And that automatically goes away, Josh, right? Excellent. Looks like everyone's sort of figured that out. Okay, so if you have questions or you want to raise your hand or say something in the middle, that's fine. I'm going to basically kick off with a little introduction on some new research that I'm doing that you can try at home. And then what we'll do is I will have any questions answered if you have questions about that. Then we'll do a live brew where I'll brew for you. I've got some hot water that should be pretty hot. And let me just heat that up. And then once we get to that point, then we'll take a 7-minute break. That'll give you a chance, if you want to follow along with me, we are going to do sort of a follow along brew. And I want to have you sort of follow with me if you have the stuff set up. So if you have the hot water, if you have your coffee setup. So I've got my Hario, I've got my scale all in front of me. So if you're ready to go after the break with your hot water, we will do a brew together. So I'll take you on a brew, we'll break, and then we'll brew together. And then at the end, I'll answer any questions. Does that sound good? And the goal is to finish by 11. So give me a thumbs up if that sounds good. Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's dive into things. I want to tell you three big tips that are going to help you make a better Hario. And there's three things that I want to talk about. So the first one is going to be to use good coffee filters. So you need something that is going to be a good filter. And this is my go-to right now. This is the 40 pack of the bleached white Hario V60 filters. Now I have this, and I also have the bigger size. So I've got the two sizes because I have multiple Harios. And my preference right now is the smaller Hario. So I've got the smaller Hario here on my desk. And so that's the first thing, finding a good filter. The second thing that we're going to talk about is locking down your recipe and your variables. And then the third thing that we're going to talk about is going to be pacing your pour. Okay, so I want to dive into each of these. But before I do that, I want to tell you a story. The brewing process, so what we're trying to do here is a little bit different once we start getting into the details. If we care about consistency here, we have to start paying attention. And so the first thing is the filter. The filter is actually the most important thing in this whole setup. Nothing else matters as much. The water doesn't matter as much. The temperature doesn't matter as much. The ratio of beans to coffee, the bloom weight, none of that matters if you've got a bad filter. There are baristas I know that if they're doing a brew, they will totally discard and throw out a filter if it is not good. They'll start right over and they won't serve the customer until they get it right. And so our job when we're brewing coffee is to make sure that we are giving it that same level of attention to detail now this is a big if you care about quality. So we were talking earlier, and we have one of our attendees has a Krups espresso machine. Well, any type of machine like that, or any kind of automated thing, we were talking about the Nespresso. So the Nespresso is another sort of all-in-one machine. And what that does is it has a recipe and it follows the recipe. And so you get consistent results because it follows the recipe with the timing, the temperature, and the quantity. And it's all ground with high quality commercial grinders, $1 million commercial grinders that you can't buy and bring home. So that is a sort of a controlled system, and you get a very consistent product from cup to cup. Now, we can argue whether Nespresso is very good or not. It doesn't really matter. The point is that it's consistent. And the same is true with Starbucks. So when we're trying to do Hario at home with our Hario setup, we need to make sure that we have a good filter. Okay. The second thing that we need to worry about is locking down our recipe and our variables. And this is really important. So this gets back to the Nespresso example. The Nespresso has everything dialed in, it's locked in, and it's going to be consistent cup to cup. When we do pour over with our Hario, we become the machine. That means we have to get the ratio right. We have to get the timing right. We have to get the weight right. We have to just really pay attention to the details. And what this really comes down to is being super, super precise and super anal about how you do this. This is a chemistry experiment. If you want consistent results, you've got to have a lab notebook. You've got to figure out what grind size is best. And then you've got to lock in all of the variables that you can control so that we're not all over the place. And I'll give you an example. Just recently, over the past 2 months, I started doing something a little bit different. I've never done this before, and it's producing better results. What I do now is when I'm preparing my coffee and I put it onto my scale, I'll put it into the Hario after I've rinsed it. And if there's too much coffee, I will scoop it out with my little spoon. I have a little spoon right in this coffee cup. Let's see. So I will go and I will scoop out the extra grinds, and I'll put them back into my my grinder holder. So I've got the Virtuoso behind me, and I'll just take this scoop and I'll put stuff back in here if it's too much. I've never done that before. The other thing I do, and you can actually see, if I put this on the right camera, you can see in there that I do have the coffee grinds in there. Sorry, Josh is trying to catch up with me. Okay, so that's the first thing I do. The other thing is, they always say that you can't remove salt from a meal when you're cooking, and that is true if you've stirred it. But if you haven't stirred it, that's not true. So I will also siphon off water, and I'll take my little cup that's next to my Hario. So if we switch over to my other camera, and I will scoop out the extra water if I poured too much. And that's an easy way to correct a mistake where we've poured too much. So those are two strategies that you can use to be a little bit more attentive. And the last thing I want to talk about with that is it all comes down to focus. We look at martial art experts, and they really hone in on how to punch. You look at someone like Bruce Lee, and they practice the same movements over and over and over and over again. And this is so important when we're doing coffee, is that we really want to control what we're doing. Cool. All right, we're getting a little, I don't know if that's a artifact from Zoom, but I'm hearing someone else in the microphone. So Josh, if you could take a look at that, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, so the third thing, we just talked about the second one, which is locking down your recipe and your variables. The third thing that I want to talk about is pacing your pour. Now, this is where the app comes into play. This is a product that I've been working on for 7 years. I've been making pour over coffee for 9 years. So if we switch over to my other camera, you can see that I've got my sort of coffee set up, and I probably need to turn things a little bit. Okay. So that we can read this a little bit better. And so here's my recipe. And so I designed this app to help pace the pour. What I realized is that it's really important to have a pacer. And I have started running half marathons. I did my first one last year, and it was a total flop. But the insight that I got was, if I am running with a group and I have a pace leader, then as long as I can see the pace leader, I'm staying on track. And so that's the important thing. And so that's what this app does. This app is not a super smart app. It's actually very dumb. It just tells you where you need to be. And if you follow and you're near it, then you're going to get better results of coffee. So what I do, I had a couple people ask me about this. They're like, should I pour continuously? And I was like, no, don't pour continuously. The point is that we want to pace our pour, just like the marathon. So in a marathon, we have someone running a 10-minute pace. We have someone running a 7-minute pace. We have someone running a 14-minute pace. We have someone walking it. And as long as you can see that person and you're near them, you're not lockstep, you're not tripping over them, you're just near them, then you're going to stay on target. And so the whole point of this app is to stay on target with that process. So I'm going to walk you through that process. All right. So I've just reviewed sort of the three most important things that I find when we're looking at Hario V60 coffee. If you can take away one thing, the most important thing is to find a good filter. If it doesn't drain well in 20 seconds, it's not good. And and I'll show you some stuff when we get to brewing, but that is the most important thing. I was tearing my hair out. I thought that I had just lost the skill 2 years ago in 2018. I had been doing Chemex for a long time because I was making a bigger batch for my wife, because I finally converted her to drinking coffee. And then she's like, I kind of want to go back to decaf. And so Then it was like, okay, well, I'm not going to do 2 Chemexes, 1 decaf, 1 regular, because we're barely drinking any of it. And so I went back to Hario. And then when I went back to Hario, I had just ordered new filters and they didn't work. So I was like, what is going on here? And it took me about 8 months to figure out. I was multiple trips to different coffee shops. I brought all of my equipment. So all of the equipment that you see on my desk in front of me, I brought that with me and I did a triage session and it worked perfectly at the coffee shop. And I was like, what is going on here? And I went back home. I was like, is it the water? Like, what is the thing here? Because so many baristas will tell you it's the water. And I was like, is it the temperature? Or was it started to feel like a reality distortion field, kind of like the reality distortion field that Steve Jobs creates around his products. And I was at a loss. So I did a second triage session with my barista at Joe Bean Coffee Roasters. I brought all the equipment. And this time I actually brought water. I brought everything. I didn't leave anything out. We brewed 2 brews, both great. The dial-in grind setting that I had done before was fantastic. No problems. I get home the next morning and it doesn't work. It takes 5 minutes to drain when it should have finished in 3. I was like, what is going on? So it turns out it was the filter. So my one takeaway is make sure your filters drain quickly because this will throw off the entire recipe. If you don't have good filters, you're going to have the wrong timing, you're going to have the wrong grind size, and it's going to taste awful. Okay. Let's take a look at any questions we have. And then we'll continue with the brew. All right, so I have one question from Jimmy. So Jimmy says, I have some issue and I have a flatbed at the end of brewing. Sorry, I'm saying this wrong. I have some issue to have a flatbed at the end of brewing. Any advice? So I know James Hoffman talks about having a flatbed, and I think Scott Rao talks about having a flatbed. I don't think it's an indication of good coffee. I think it's a faulty metric, and I wouldn't bet my cup of coffee on having a flatbed. The easiest way to get a flatbed is to do what they do, and you cannot do that. It's not possible with this Hario. So you need a size 2. This is a size 1, so this will not work. So Josh, if we switch over to or just hold it up. Here we go. So this is a size 1, and you can tell because on it, it will say Hario 01. Okay. I have a glass variant of this as well. I don't think this one actually has anything on it, but this is also a size 1. And do I have my size 2? Nope, I forgot that one at home. So I have a size 2 red one, and that one is plastic. And now the plastic one, you can get the flat bottom. And so if you're trying to follow the James Hoffman technique and you try to do that swirl or the shake or I've seen them tap, you're going to get a flat bottom, but it's going to spill on this one. So it's not going to work. And every time I've tried the Scott Rao method, it has not tasted good. So I don't like it, but I need to practice it more to see what I'm doing wrong. So that's going to be another experiment. Chris asked a question, what temperature do I like my water at? I make my water as hot as possible. And so that's what I'm going to talk about once we get into the brew. The reason I heated up the water again is I need it super hot. And actually, I have to heat up my kettle. I don't have a hot plate in here. And so I'm going to have to pour some water into my Hario kettle, which I've modified with a thermometer, though I don't use the thermometer really anymore, except to make sure that it's hot enough. And then I reheat the water. So I'll put this back on my stovetop at home. Here, I have to fill this with some of the water to just heat up the metal because the metal is going to cool down the water. And then I put the water back into my hot water heater and I heat it up again, and then I pour it back in. So it's it's a little bit of a juggle, but I want as hot as possible. And that's one of the things that Scott Rao has started saying. Now, again, the challenging part with coffee is that if you listen to the experts, there's a lot of different ways to do it well, and you just have to pick the one that's easiest. And so my goal is to provide a simple and easy to follow Hario V60 method that is easy to reproduce. And that is our primary goal. If it's hard to reproduce, like I've found Scott Rao's, then it's not worth trying to do it. And if it's super technical and it requires you to do it just right or to get a swirl or whatever you're supposed to do, I think using a spoon is way easier than swirling. So thank you for that question. Okay, so those are the two questions we have now. If you have questions while we're brewing, please feel free to add those to Slido, and I will answer them once we get there. So I'm gonna try something. We're gonna try and walk with my microphone, and I might have to swap mics. So let's see how this works. Let me mute myself. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can I get a thumbs up? Excellent. Okay. So we're going to go over to my second setup. And this is my hot water heater. So this is just I don't even know what this is, a Proctor Silex. I have to overfill this a little bit just to get enough water for my Hario. So the max line is down here, and I fill it like a centimeter above that. Okay, I've got a Hario Virtuoso here. I've got it dialed into 16. This is what I found when I went to Joe Bean. We dialed it in 2 times, and both times we started from scratch, and we ended up at this spot. So this is the sweet spot for the recipe that I'm doing. Now your grinder, if it's not a Hario Virtuoso, is going to be different, and your internal settings, or you can actually take the cover off this. There's internal settings that's going to make it slightly off. So my parents actually have to do it, I think, at a 14, not a 16. So you're going to have to play with the numbers, and I'll talk more about that in an upcoming workshop. Okay, we need hot water, we need beans, and I have to get my beans. So the other thing I do, I don't like to spend any more extra time in the kitchen in the morning, so I will pre-portion 21.1 grams of coffee into these little containers. So let's get our hot water. Right now I'm heating up. I'm not going to pour everything because this is going to take too long to pour. I'll get this going again, and then we'll grind. Okay, so I heated up my kettle. The kettle is now 170 degrees. That's much better than room temperature. The water is now reheating. I'm going to close that so that it will automatically shut off once we get to temperature. I've got my beans. Usually give it a couple extra. So that's a little over probably 22 grams of coffee. So I've got to make sure that I don't pour too much. And so the grind size that you can see, you can try and take a screenshot of that if that's helpful. I think what might be ideal is if I can get an image that is 1-to-1 with the size of your screen. And so I'll have to do some research on how to do that. Okay, so now I've got the hot water. Let's transfer that. I probably need to invest in a hot plate, but I haven't done that, so that would help me in the office. Someone told me that there's a hot plate that can heat up water in 3 minutes, and I'm like, wow, maybe that's what I need. Okay, so let's go back over here. I need to switch mics. 1 second. Try not to do reverb. All right, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me again. Excellent. Audio is good. Okay, so I've got the Akai scale here. This is a 1/10 of a gram accurate scale. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to pre-wet our filter. I like to do about 180 grams, though I don't think I have enough water to do all of that. So I'm just probably, well, I normally do this twice. So I'll probably just do this one time. But I want to get this hot. So in the ideal situation, I'll do this again just to make sure it's draining. Now, the thing I want you to pay attention to is how fast it's going to drain. I'm going to reuse this water. That way I don't have to heat up more water right now. And so what I'll do is I'll just take my thermos and I'll pour this hot water into my thermos. And then we can pour 180 grams again. Okay, so if we just put that back on top. So this is my Hario test, and I don't do this anymore. This used to take 5 minutes every morning, and it was really time consuming. So I'm super thankful that I don't do it, but it really helped me find a better process. So what I do is I just pour about 180 grams. So let's get 180 grams, which should just be everything in here. And what we really care about right now is how fast it's draining. So if you look at the speed it goes down, you want your filter to do something like this or even a little faster. You'll notice that if you pick it up, it will drain faster. So that's the one trick that I want you to write down. I think picking up the filter, once you know that you have a good filter, is going to produce much better coffee. So just pick up the filter. What's happening is there's some kind of physics, and it's doing this suction, which is slowing down the drain. And so by picking it up, you remove the surface tension, and the water can drain faster. And that's important when we care about the timing of the recipe. So this gives me more consistency by picking it up and putting it down. Okay, the next thing that I'll do is I'll put that water in my cup, and then I've got a discard cup in here, or if I'm in a kitchen, I'll dump it down the drain. So my discard cup is just a soup bowl with a handle, so it's just this. It's super easy for just throwing water when you're in like an office environment. Okay, so next up, I need a dish towel. So I folded up a dish towel. Ideally, you don't want this wet. So this dish towel, I made a mess earlier when I was heating up extra water, and it's a little bit wet. If it's wet, it's going to transfer heat. So I have a backup, which we'll probably use so I don't burn my hands. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a two-handed pour technique. And let me demonstrate what that looks like. So I fold up my dish towel. So I mousse cook. A mousse cook is from my aunt. I like mousses. So she gives me lots of mousse gifts. Hey, so the next thing, I am going to pour my coffee in here. So I've got, basically we're trying to get mise en place, which means everything in its place so that you can just brew without thinking. Okay, so I poured exactly 21 grams, and I think we can read that. It looks like you can. Are my numbers backwards, or are they readable? They look good to me.
No, you're straight.
You want to just give me a thumbs up? Excellent. Okay, so I've got exactly the weight. Now you can see that the scale decided maybe you don't. So in this situation, what I'll do is I'll take my spoon, I'll dry it off on my towel, and then I'm just going to remove a little bit of coffee beans. You can see it's really just one coffee bean that we'd have to remove for half a gram. And we can see that like we're super close. So like I don't worry this much, but I just want to try and get that number. It's going all over the place. And also when you're like talking and spitting, it's also like pushing air. And so that might cause some issues. So I'll just put that in my little discard bin for my grinder. And then I'll put that over here. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start the brew. Now I can look at my thermometer, and since I don't have a hot plate, I haven't kept my water hot, but I'm just going to go through the process so that you can see what this is. This is not going to be my best cup because I'm going to be talking through, and I told you that focus is really important. I think I told you that. So if you don't focus on the coffee and what's in front of you, it's going to be very hard to get consistent results. Okay, so next up, let's talk about the recipe. The recipe that I'm going to show you is designed for it's designed, let me see if I can get this. It's designed for a dense coffee. The coffee I'm brewing, it's not this bag, but I don't have the original bag with me right now, is from Joe Bean Coffee Roasters. And Joe Bean Coffee Roasters is doing higher quality beans. And what that means is that the beans are denser. And it's just like a decaf. So when you're doing a decaf, you have a denser bean and you have to do it a little bit differently. Okay. So now that we've got this set up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with my recipe. So the one change that I make for a denser coffee is I make it 2 minutes and 10 seconds instead of my standard 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That's the only change I'll make on the recipe. All the other settings are going to stay the same. We're going to hit done. I've got 21 grams. We're doing 340. I'm going to move my mic and then we're going to do the brew. So I'm going to hit start. And this is where two hands is useful. I'll put the dish towel underneath like this. So I'm holding it. And let me just restart because I couldn't get that in the camera frame. So I'll start again. Excellent. So I want around 42 grams. I'll put this down. I'll grab my spoon, and then we're going to stir vigorously. This is the part where you really need to stir, make sure there's no dry beans. If there's anything dry, you're going to have issues with flavor being off. I'll rinse my spoon lightly. And now is the point where we are going to be doing our pour. So here, we're going to go around lightly. And so this is the most important part. Be very gentle in the beginning. Don't pour super fast. And try not to hit the Hario. I'm trying to like dodge my microphone. And so right now, what we can see is that I'm behind schedule. And so I'm trying to catch up. Let's pick this up. So what I did just there was to help it drain. Sometimes when you're behind schedule, the only thing you can do is either restart or see if you can salvage it by picking it up. The other thing I'm noticing is that this is teetering a little bit, and so you want this to be stable. So I guess I had some kind of coffee bean or something on the scale that was causing it not to be stable. And the other thing you're going to notice is that because I'm not paying attention as much as I'm trying, I'd like to, because I'm talking, is that I have some beans around these edges, and you really don't want them up here. You want that incorporated, otherwise it's going to cause problems. Okay, so we just need to add the last little bit. And the reason I say to be gentle in the beginning, so let's just go over a little bit. So now I'm over. And so this is where, again, I'll use my spoon at home. And before I stir, I will just siphon off some of that coffee water. So within a gram is enough. And then I'll give this a stir. And this is, you cannot swirl this Hario. So I don't worry about a flat bottom. I actually don't like how it looks. And I much prefer to not have a flat bottom. Okay. So now we can dump the water. Rinse my cup. Sorry, it's a little, I have to dodge a lot of objects in here. And now we're done. So at this point, we need to make sure everything drains. If we take this off before it's fully drained, then we're missing out on our ratio. So I'll take that off with my cup. I'll take this over. I've got another coffee cup I can set this down on. And that is it for the recipe. So if you have any questions, you can ask them now. Otherwise, we'll take a short break. I will taste the coffee and then we'll come back and we will finish with a live brew session. So yeah, the electric, so Chris says that he has the electric gooseneck and that's super useful. My parents have one. I don't have one. The reason I don't have one is because it's heavier and my arms got tired from holding it, but I don't know. There's something also about the design. I do not like the design of the Bonavita. I think it doesn't look very pretty. It's functional, but it's not pretty. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm aerating the coffee, and this is something I've only seen ever done at Pete's Coffee. And what this does is it reincorporates oxygen and air back into the water, and it changes the texture of your coffee. So I do that, and then I will let this cool down before I taste it. The nice thing about having the drain time is that it allows us to see how long it's been since we finished. Let me just close my thermos. So I think the ideal drain down time is going to be whatever's in the recipe. And so this is where you have to follow a known recipe. Now, the recipe that I currently have in Brew Coffee is it's a 3-minute recipe for Hario V60. I highly recommend that. And if you want to follow along after our break, I think doing that's going to get better coffee. So try that. If you're just winging it, so that's the thing. Like my grandmother's cooking is very good. And if I just try to wing a recipe without actually following it, it's going to be nowhere near as close as her cooking. But then the other thing you have to understand is that there's things that my grandmother did as a chef or cook that I'm not doing the same way. And so we need to make sure that we do the same thing there as well. Excellent. Let's take a short break. Why don't we do 5 minutes? Heat up your water if you want to follow along with me. Looks like we've got Tony here. Excellent. Nice to see you, Tony. And we're going to do a little live brew. So if you want to try and follow along with me again, we can do it again. I will try and do it maybe a little bit better than my last one, but let's give it a taste. And then Josh, can you put a timer on the screen for 5 minutes with Super User Timer? I forgot to ask you since I can't screen share. All right. Ask and Josh, if you could also put the link in for Slido if they want to ask any questions there.
Cool.
Or you can ask them in the normal chat. And let's take a little break. So I'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay. I just had my water boil. So if you are following along, uh, can you just give me a thumbs up if you want to try and follow along with me if you have hot water? Oh, it only, I can't see these thumbs up on the participants view. That's makes that not ideal. Thank you. All right. So Ernest and Chris, you're going to try and follow along. Excellent. This will be a good experiment. Um, in terms of recipe, the recipe was kind of in the email I sent. I will have the full details later, so it's a little late to type that up right now, but I'll work on getting that for you next time. Okay, some tasting notes. So I tasted the coffee that we brewed, and it's a little bit harsh. It's a little bit bitter, and it's because I didn't control the timing well. It's because I wasn't pouring very well because I kept bumping into my microphone right here. So I need to make sure I move the microphone out of the way. Were you able to hear me even if it wasn't super close to me? Was that okay? If you give me a thumbs up. Okay. So I'll position it so I'm going to sound a little bit quieter because it kept interfering with what I was going to do. So what I'll do, Alexandre, if you want to follow along, you can just sync up. And I've had people on YouTube do this where they just, once I hit the play button, they start the brew and they just sort of follow along that way. So you can do that with this video, but I'm going to do 2 screen captures. So essentially I'll have 2 different videos that you could watch. One is going to be the fast pour, which is for denser coffees. And I do that for all of my Joe Bean coffees. And then the other one is going to be for just a normal Hario. So some coffees don't need to be poured as fast. And so I'll have those 2 different setups. So let me grab my water. It probably would help if I had a little more coffee this morning. Excellent. I see we've got someone with their Hario set up. Awesome work. Alexandre, what are you using to hold up your iPhone? Do you have like a tripod? I've got, so just for context, my camera is on this sort of Gorilla Pod. Okay, we've got hot water, I've got my beans. Okay. I'm not going to be able to make a perfect cup, but I'll take you through the process one more time. So we'll do everything that I did before. We're going to need a filter, or I'm going to have a mess. Yes, there is a way to make a perfect grind size, and that'll be in an upcoming workshop. I'll go over that. Okay, first step is to get our filter wet. So if you haven't already done that, you can do this. If you've already put coffee in, don't worry. You can do that better the next time. I'm going to pick this up to remove surface tension. It's really important. It improves the consistency. And normally I do this twice, but since I have limited water here and I don't have as big a tea kettle. I'm just going to do this once, and then I'll put this in my discard cup, or I'll throw that into the sink. Okay, so next up, we are done with that recipe. So same recipe as before, we're doing 21 grams of coffee, and I need to make sure it weighs the same. So I will tare my scale. I want you to tare your scale if you haven't, and double check to make sure that you're adding the right coffee. So I slowly add the coffee and try to get this to be 21 grams. Within 0.1 grams is good enough, so I'll just go with that for this. I like to just shake this even, and then what we're going to do is we're going to pour. You need to have a towel to do 2 hands, so I highly recommend doing 2 hands. We're going to hold the Hario kettle, and this is going to give you stability. Right, so once you have your coffee and you're ready to go, tare the scale, and then give me a thumbs up when you're ready. Or actually, is there a different thing we can do, Josh?
Looks like just a hand clap or a thumbs up.
Oh, I'm muted. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Looks like there's only like a hand clap reaction or a thumbs up.
Is that like a setting that we didn't configure properly?
I think that they just changed it maybe. Didn't used to be that way. There used to be several.
So raise hand. Does that persist? So if you go into the participants view, see if you can raise your hand and let me know if you're ready. Okay, so Chris is ready. Alexandra is ready. Is that all we have? Chris, if your water drains too fast, that means the grind size is not the right size. It's too coarse. Okay, so since we're ready, what I'm going to do is make sure we can see my screens. And I am going to start the brew. So I'm going to count down from 3. So I'm going to say 3, 2, 1, and then we're going to start. Okay, 3, 2, 1, start. So this is our bloom. We just need to get everything wet. So around 42 grams. And we just pour that. Now I went a little over, no big deal. Stir it, make sure there's no bubbles. Great. And then we can rinse our spoon with a tiny bit of water. You can wait until you start the actual pour, which is at 30 seconds. So we've got a few more seconds, or you can do it right away. It doesn't really matter too much. So don't get super freaked out. But then we want to be very gentle with this pour. So I'm going to try a very slow stream. And this is one-handed. Now this takes practice. That's hard. So to make it easier, get a towel, put it underneath, and use your other non-dominant hand to help you with the pour. This part, we want to add the water, but we don't want to just push it out. You'll sometimes see when I'm doing it, and you can watch the video recording later, that I don't want to have huge like bubbles coming up from the bottom. And now I'm looking at my pacer, and then I'm looking at my coffee, and I'm like, oh, I got to get a little bit more water in here. Now I feel like I'm behind because I'm talking. And so what I'm going to do, you can just easily pick up the filter. I've only had one filter break on me when I do this. I've done this a ton of times, so it's usually pretty reliable. If it does break, you'll have to put it through another filter, and you can still salvage it. It just won't be good. Okay, so we want to stay with our pacer. So I'm near the pacer. I like to usually be in front of it. I am still behind schedule. So I've got to keep making sure that I'm adding stuff. Now, I'm going to make a little call out. If you look at my iPhone, you can see there's a little edge here, and that is my cue that I need to add more water. So I'm really behind schedule, but I want to show you sort of things that you can be looking for. And you can watch this again to sort of see what I'm talking about the next time you do your brew. Okay, so we're close to, oh, I forgot. I adjusted mine. I'm doing a 2 minute and 10 second. So I forgot to walk through that adjustment. So you might be pouring a little bit slower than mine. And so you should be finishing right around 2 minutes and 30 seconds, which will be in 5 seconds. Next, I did a little extra. So I'm going to pull off a little bit, and I did this a little bit slow, but that's good enough, and then to stir. You really don't want to have high and dry grounds. So those edges, if I was doing this again and paying attention, I wouldn't have these grinds up here, and I would have stirred sooner. Okay. So that's our Hario. If you stir, you're never going to get a flat bottom. So don't worry about getting a flat bottom. Worry about how it tastes. Next up, we will transfer this. I have a size 2 Hario carafe, so I'll just use that to pour. And this is just to aerate. You don't need to do this step, but I feel like it's better. It is a little bit risky, so don't burn yourself. I've poured boiling coffee on my hands, so don't sue me. You've been warned. It is hot. And then we can taste and see if I did any better this batch. Interesting. This one's sour. So my first one was bitter. This one's sour. All right. So tell me your results. What did we? And you might have to let it cool. So I am tasting a little soon. If you give it a minute, that won't burn your tongue. So how is it? How is this process? I know it's probably not going to be the ideal cup right now, but if you practice this again, I think you're going to get better results. Okay, so if you want to get better coffee, start taking notes of what you're doing and taste test. So I have now 2 brews that I can test. And I can test the old brew and the new brew. So let me move some stuff around just to wrap up. So we're just at the top of the hour. So I've got my new brew. I've got my old brew. If you've got your old brew in a thermos, it'll stay hot. So then you can do like an accurate taste test of like, how does this taste when they're both hot versus how it tastes after it's sort of cooled down. So that is sort of where we're at. Josh, if you want to switch this back to me instead of the coffee, I can answer any last questions if there's any questions. And then I will follow up with the video recording, and I think we'll try and get the transcripts. I'll get answers to every question that was asked with some written responses so that we can look at that. And I do want to make 2 videos if you're on Android and you haven't been able to follow along, so that you could just start one of the videos and then play it back. And I'll put that on YouTube, but I'll also probably have a Dropbox link so that you can download it to your phone and not have to be connected to the internet. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, Paul, quick question.
Yeah.
This is Ernie. Ernie,
Mm-hmm.
what is the total drain time, well, from start to finish, pour time and drain time for just normal coffee? I do typically the 20 grams, and I've been going 320 to 330 on my total pour.
You're doing 20 grams?
Yeah, and this brew time guide, which is a separate app, says 320 to 330. And so I generally try to stop at 330. And what I've been finding is I'm between 3 minutes and 330. And I adjusted course because I used to be closer to 4 minutes, which I felt like was too long. Mm-hmm. I find for me the grind size is the big unknown. So I appreciate any further videos that you do on that subject.
Definitely. That's Thank you for that.
Definitely for me too, grind size is one of those things that's, I mean, it's hard to get with my manual grinder also to get consistent results, I think. But yeah, anything on grind size is really helpful.
Ernie, what type of grinder do you have?
So I have the Breville Smart Grinder Pro, and different sites like Home Barista suggested like 50 as a reference point. So for my paper drip, I've been, it's in the 49 to 54 range. So I've been actually playing with 50, 47, 52. And, I think I helped regulate my total drip time, but I'm not sure that
it's a Breville Smart Grinder Pro.
Yes.
And what grind setting are you using right now?
Well, I've been playing between 47 and 52.
47 to 52.
Yeah. And
Excellent.
I had read somewhere that 50 was pretty close on a different blog site.
Okay.
So I use that as an index point. But and again, I've watched the number. I've only been doing this for 2 weeks. I got all my gear 2 weeks ago.
That's awesome.
I definitely looked at Rao and I looked at Hoffman, and so you're kind of radical, but I got some good tips from you about doing a better job at stirring, absolutely lifting up the paper so that you maybe nullify any vacuum effect. So there's some really good tips there, but I'm not sure, frankly, Paul, that my palate is distinguishing well enough between good and bitter. So that's something that's something that you just have to, I guess, evolve to,
I have some ideas for how you can do it. We can talk more about that in my another workshop. Or if you want to follow up via email, if you just shoot me an email, we can try and share some stuff. So it looks like Alexandre is also using the Breville, and he uses the 45 setting. Inside burr is number 8. I don't know what that means, but if that's useful for you, Ernie.
Okay.
I do think so. Timing, I think, is the thing you've got to lock down. And so when I'm doing a brew, everything resolves around trying to get it to be in 3 minutes. That's my recipe. And so a lot of other apps have different recipes. The 3 minutes is what Joe Bean Coffee Roasters uses. And it is the best recipe that I've ever used. So that is my gold standard. I have tried some other methods, and that's going to be in my upcoming course. I'm going to go over the 4-6 method, and I'm also going to do a cold brew. As some research, I am going to try James Hoffman's method. I haven't tried his method since his new video had come out. And I'm going to retry Scott Rao's method, and I'll have emails and articles on both of those. So I definitely, there's a lot of recipes, there's a lot of ways to do it, but what I think is important is if it's easy and repeatable and consistent. And that's the most important thing. And that's the thing that all of these baristas don't talk about, because they make this like 20 times a day when they're on the bar. And we're at home and we're making it once, maybe twice. So they get a lot more practice. All right, and Chris has the Hario Mini Slim Plus. Wait, is the Plus different from the Pro? Tony's using the same thing? I'll do some research on some of these grinders and see what I can dig up. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much for all the questions. I really appreciate you showing up, and thank you for following along with me today. That was super cool to see you brew coffee, and I hope that tomorrow morning, or if you brew another cup, that it tastes a little bit better.
Paul, can I sneak in one more question?
Yes.
When you're done with the pour, and let's say you're right at 225, 230, should you begin stirring the grounds right away?
Stir it right away.
Okay.
If you're following Hoffman or Rao, they'll tell you to do the swirl or the tap. The whole point is to get the only thing you're trying to do is to get the beans off the paper edge so that there's no high and dry beans. So you can have the particles. So this is not great. But if we look at my thing here, so you don't want any coffee. Am I holding this wrong? You don't want coffee up here on this rim. And so the whole point of either stirring or giving a slight swirl, it's not a like swirl, 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 swirl. It's just a whoosh. And it's just to remove the stuff from the sides. Another thing you can try is just pick it up and put it down. That'll get the same sort of effect. It's going to cause gravity to pull it back down. So I really think it's all about just getting coffee so that it's down and it's being still extracted, because it won't be extracted up here. The shape of what it looks like, I don't think is important.
You got a nice flat surface there anyway. So even though that's not your goal, you're
I mean,
flat,
I've seen flatter. If I do the swirl in a size 2, it's going to be way flatter.
Yeah, I have a 2, so I enjoy that. Well, thank you again. Appreciate your time and the experience.
Happy to help. Thanks so much. We're going to end it here. If you have any other questions, just shoot me an email and I will follow up. I'm a little backlogged on email, but I'm trying to catch up. So thanks so much. And Josh, you can